Welcome to American Catechism and Stab the Dragon Productions. Today is Thursday, July 31st, 2025, and we're coming to you from Fort Worth, Texas, where it is 105 degrees. Tomorrow, August 1st, is the birthday of the state of Colorado, becoming the 38th state on August 1st of 1876. So it will be 149 years old. Happy birthday to the state of my birth. Tonight, I want to discuss just a little bit of Colorado history and review a Colorado whiskey. We have Stranahan's Blue Peak Single Malt. Now, I've moved around quite a bit in my life, having lived in 7 states total, but moving a lot in my early childhood especially, so that I went to 2 kindergartens, 2 first grades, and 3 fourth grades. But I was born in Colorado. So I'm going to celebrate my home state tonight. With later videos, I may celebrate all the states that I have lived in or my family's related to, but let's start tonight with Stranahan's Single Malt. Just the facts. This is an 86 proof single malt, meaning that its mash bill consists of only malted barley. No corn, no wheat, no rye. Now, for most people, a single malt makes them think of Scotch whiskey. But this is an American single malt, which is the newest official category of whiskey in America. Just started January 19th of this year, I think. Distilled and bottled in Denver, Colorado at 5,280 feet elevation in the Colorado climate using pristine Rocky Mountain spring water. This 750 milliliter bottle costs about $43 in Fort Worth. Tasting notes. It's sweet, I get caramel, but then I get wood, tobacco, leather, coffee. The single malt flavor from Scotch is here for sure, but it has married that Rocky Mountain funk that is very similar to my beloved Texas funk. If you've ever had some Texas whiskeys like Balcones or TX Bourbon, Garrison Brothers, things like that, this Colorado whiskey has got a similar funk, but different. My score for this whiskey was a 92, letter grade A+. This is an instant favorite. My recommendation. I am disappointed in myself for not having tried Stranahan's before now. This is an amazing, great whiskey that has earned its place as one of my absolute top favorite brands, along with TX, Iron Root, Balcones, Acre, Tawakero, Ranger Creek, Garrison Brothers, all those Texas whiskeys. If you want to try a Rocky Mountain whiskey, this is the one to try. At a reasonable price, this simply is hard to beat. Now, I'm a newbie when it comes to American single malts or even Scotch single malts, but my taste buds know what they like, and they love Stranahan's. I give it my highest recommendation. Now, let's do some history of Colorado. But first, a sip. Colorado is known as the Centennial State. James Michener wrote a novel, historical novel, based on fact, about Colorado and the Centennial of the United States. It was voted into statehood in July of 1876, and its date of entry into the Union was August 1st, 1876, the centennial anniversary of the birth of the United States. Colorado was the 38th state, and this state was originally a part of New Mexico Territory in the south, Kansas Territory in the east, Utah Territory in the west, and Nebraska Territory in the north. So originally, there was no Colorado Territory. To conduct territorial business then, residents of Denver had to travel 600 miles to eastern Kansas. Boulder area residents, a like distance to eastern Nebraska. Those west of the Continental Divide went to central Utah, and those in the south, Santa Fe, New Mexico. The U.S. created the Colorado Territory in 1861, right at the start of the Civil War. What led to a sudden influx of people in Colorado was the gold rush of 1858 and 59, bringing thousands of people west to either search for gold or sell goods to those who were smitten with gold fever. The trek west was a long struggle over the prairies and desert wasteland of western Kansas in covered wagons. They eventually had a stagecoach line that could get there in about a week. And then finally, when the railroads came to Colorado in 1870, the rush intensified and the population grew. Statehood became a real possibility. But the story of Colorado goes back well before the gold rush, railroads, and statehood. This is a part of North America that has some of the richest, most fascinating ancient Indian ruins of anywhere. The Pueblo cliff dwellers of Chaco Canyon date back to the 12th century, and other evidence is in various places puts early man in Colorado as far back as 11,500 BC, with some evidence pointing all the way back to 37,000 years ago. I was born in the southwestern part of Colorado, reasonably close to the Pueblo Chaco Canyon area, and my dad, before I was born, my dad went to visit Chaco Canyon. The political history of Colorado goes back to Mexico claiming this land as part of Nuevo Mexico, but then Spain sold most of this land to the French, and in 1803 the United States made the Louisiana Purchase from France and acquired most of it, and the Mexicans have not forgiven us ever since. The borders, though, were disputed with Mexico. Then in 1836 you have the Texian Revolt from Mexico, which further complicated the boundaries, which ultimately led to the Mexican-American War of 1846, and then the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1848 that settled some of the claims, and Colorado became American territory in the clear. But it's still being contested now, isn't it? The sectionalism and slavery issues of the 1850s entered into the political birth of Colorado, but most of the settlers were from the Midwest and northern states, while only about a third were from the South. Despite being on the frontier, Colorado got involved militarily in the Civil War, as William Gilpin, the first territorial governor of the Colorado Territory, organized a small army to protect Colorado from an invasion from the South by a Texas army. Colonel John Sullivan led the regiment of Coloradans to Fort Union in northern New Mexico. Colonel Slough then fought the Texas Confederates at the Battle of Glorieta, New Mexico, and routed them. Now, this is just a sampling of the rich history of the Centennial State. The major resource I have used in Colorado, this book, Colorado, A History of the Centennial State, 5th edition by Abbott, Leonard, and Noel. This book is exceptionally well written. I've only read the first 5 chapters, but it's very good. I highly recommend it. Now, on to the whiskey. History. Stranahan's is the first legal distillery in Colorado since Prohibition days. Founded in 2004 by Jess Graber, volunteer fireman, and George Stranahan, whose barn was on fire. After the fire was out, they started talking whiskey, and Stranahan, the owner of a local brewery and a whiskey connoisseur, Graber and Stranahan teamed up, and they released their first bottle in 2006, and Rocky Mountain Single Malt was born. Stranahan's is the most awarded American single malt whiskey. As a category, again, this is a very new category. So for history, 5 of 5, despite its youth. Bottle, label, and marketing. The bottle is one of the tallest bottles in my cabinet. It's got classic curves on the front. It's got the curvy neck here. However, on the back side, it is flattened. I guess you can tell that. Now, what is the use of having a flattened backside like that? Well, you can't see it, but if you lay it down on the table, it doesn't roll away. That's the only use I've figured out for it. Now, It's got some embossing on here on the back. It's got the address, name and address right there. The label is bold. Well, notice also the label is angled, similar to Johnny Walker, and then they're also color-coded. You've got the blue here for Blue Peak. The regular basic Stranahan's has a yellow, and then there's kind of a red one and a silver one. So, you know, they use a similar color coding scheme to Johnny Walker. This label is bold, yet fairly simple and small, given the normal information that is provided and a little bit of hoo-ha. It has the outline of some Rocky Mountains. You can see that. And includes Rocky Mountain in the name. Rocky Mountain, Stranahan's Blue Peak Single Malt Whiskey. So it's a classic looking bottle and label, and I've heard about this brand for years by word of mouth, several online reviews, but I've not seen any official advertisements except maybe on Instagram. I then sought out some Stranahan ads on YouTube, and I found 3 or 4 stretching back as far back as 8 years ago. And I thought the ads weren't all that great, not very effective, I don't think. But whiskey reviews and documentaries or news stories on YouTube were abundant and very effective. 4 out of 5 is my scoring for bottle, label, and marketing. I think they might need a better marketing plan for media. Composition. This is an 86 proof whiskey. No age statement, and it's a single malt. Single malts are somewhat simple. You've got malted barley alone. But which type of barley would be helpful? Here in Texas, a lot of the distilleries break down what types of corn, what types of barley, what types of rye or wheat they use. They use a variety of casks with this whiskey, some new, some used. And the Solera finish here, if you can see this on the bottle, Solera finish, what that basically means is they will take some younger stuff, some middle stuff, and older stuff and pour it into a vat and then blend it. They bottle some of that and put the rest back in casks. So the casks all have a mixture of young, middle, and older stuff. And so that's a kind of an ongoing process. And it's taken from the French world of cognac and brandy, I think. So in explaining what American single malt is, it's helpful to say that it's very similar to Scotch single malt, but there's some obvious differences. The biggest difference is this has to be made in America, just like bourbon, whereas Scotch must be made in Scotland. It also has to be made by a single distillery, hence the term single in the title. So there's no sharing or blending with other distilleries or other whiskeys anywhere. The term malt means malted barley alone. Now, bourbon can be made with at least 51% corn, and the rest is any combination of grains. Blended Scotch has got single malts and single grain whiskeys from multiple distilleries. Malts, this gives American single malt a far wider range than Scotch, I think, because you can have different types of barrels in oak in the American single malt, but Scotch must use used casks. So this is going to have some new cask and some used. The elevation of this distillery, 5,280 feet per the label, and the mountain air heavily impacts the terroir and therefore imparts a lot of flavor to the whiskey. They use Rocky Mountain stream water. That's also impactful. And so I'm going to say, just as Texas terroir and climate seriously impacts the flavor of Texas whiskey, this Rocky Mountain whiskey has a taste that is unique and yet very much like the Texas funk. So I guess I'll call it Rocky Mountain funk. There's no age statement on the bottle, and again with that Solera finish, it'd be kind of impossible. So for composition, I'm going to say 13 out of 15. Appearance. While not exceptionally dark, like some of my Texas whiskeys, this is pretty dark, so it's a 3 out of 5, 3 pointing to 4. There's no coloring added, whereas Scotch, Irish, and Canadian, you can add coloring. So appearance of this whiskey is a 3 out of 5. The nose, now today, because it's 105 degrees out there, I did something I never do. I put ice in my whiskey. I never do that, but today I did that. But I did take notes yesterday. So on the nose, immediately, I get the Rocky Mountain Funk, which reminds me of the Texas Funk, but with a subtle difference. And see, now on ice, I don't smell anything. It is sweet, caramel, spicy, but there's hints of wood, leather, tobacco, coffee. The website agrees with my tobacco and leather notes and adds dried apricots, nutmeg, and cinnamon toast. Well, I really don't know about cinnamon toast, but the nose I did find to be rich and inviting when it was neat. In ice, nothing. So 9 out of 10 for the nose. Taste. This is a stunningly good whiskey. The taste is true to the nose with a sweet caramel flavor. The wood, spice, leather, tobacco, coffee dominate for me. This is right in the middle of my flavor profile that I get from the Texas whiskeys, like Balcones, Acre, Ranger Creek, Tawakero, Ironroot, TX Bourbon, Garrison Brothers. Yet, there's a subtle difference in the Rocky Mountain Funk as opposed to the Texas Funk. Hard to define, and if I did a blind taste between a Texas whiskey and this, I don't know that I'd be able to figure it out. I think it may be, though, one of the things is the single malt flavor that is similar to Scotch flows right through the heart of this, whereas some of the Texas single malts I've had, and I've not had that many, I don't really pick up that single malt flavor. So the Scotch single malt flavor married to the Mountain Funk is a winning combination for me. I have very little experience with this type of whiskey, American single malts, other than 2 Texas whiskeys I've had. Acre, Texas single malt, fantastic. Balcones lineage, single malt, amazing. But this Blue Peak is simply outstanding. 24 out of 25 points for taste. Mouthfeel, burn, and finish. The mouthfeel is rich, coating, creamy, and the burn goes in the back of my throat. Just a little bit in the sinuses, but not down the chest. You know you're drinking the whiskey for sure. And at 86 proof, it's got a decent burn. If you're looking for a smooth, gentle whiskey, this one might be a challenge for you. The flavors stay with me for a while, but turn a tad tannic and bitter on the finish, which I don't mind in the least. Again, this flavor profile is a home run for me. And with the long finish, it's almost perfect. So 14 out of 15. Now, one thing that I found interesting was the reviews that I watched online. None of them actually mentioned the tobacco, leather, coffee notes that I get. And so, they were talking about fruits and honey and, stuff. And it's like, man, to me, the Colorado Funk, the Rocky Mountain Funk, that dominates the flavor profile here. I get no lemon or orange that other people were getting. So I don't know. Maybe my mouth is just odd. All right, neat or mixer. Well, neat yesterday is what I had, and this is simply amazing neat. At this price point of $43, it does stretch my willingness to use it as a mixer, but yesterday I did make an old-fashioned with Blue Peak using maple syrup, Angostura bitters, orange peel, and 2 Luxardo cherries. It was simply outstanding, and my wife even liked it as well, even though she could tell it was higher proof than the normal 80 proof whiskeys that she will drink in a cocktail. And then Normally, I never put ice in whiskey because it dilutes the flavor so much. And I can tell it's diluted, heavily diluted by now. I got nothing on the nose, but this is still nice with ice on a 105-degree day. So 5 points out of 5 for Nieder Mixer. Price, value, and availability. Goody Goody has this for $42.99. Total Wine, $43.49, and Specs $45.78. At these prices, this whiskey is a great value and has great availability. 10 out of 10 points. Bonus, because this is an instant favorite with a good history for such a young brand, the flavors are remarkable. This is 5 bonus points out of 5, giving me a total score of 92. Letter grade for drinkability is A+. Yes. Analysis and recommendation. Again, I'm disappointed in myself for not trying Stranahan's before now. This is an amazing, great whiskey that has earned its place as one of my absolute top favorite brands, along with the Texas brands TX, Iron Root, Balcones, Acre, etc. I have another Colorado single malt that I've been waiting to open for an occasion coming up in October. I went ahead and opened it last night. 10th Mountain American Single Malt, 90 proof. It was very similar to Stranahan's. I think the Stranahan's was stronger and better in some ways, but the 10th Mountain Single Malt again had the Rocky Mountain funk. It was amazing. So there is a shared flavor amongst the two Colorado single malts that I've had. 10th Mountain is coming from Vail, Colorado, which is 9,000 feet, right? Something like that. So if you want to try a Rocky Mountain whiskey, this is the one to try at a very reasonable price. It's simply hard to beat. Now, I'm a newbie when it comes to single malts, either Scotch or American. But my taste buds know what they like, and they love Stranahan's Blue Peak. I give it my highest recommendation. So, in conclusion, there's another special day coming up that American Catechism and Stab the Dragon will celebrate. The birthday of the United States Coast Guard. And there's a bourbon out of Cincinnati called Gulf of America. But this comes to us from Ohio, Cincinnati, Ohio. What does this bourbon have to do with the Coast Guard? What does it have to do with the Gulf of America? Well, besides a political statement, there's actually a tie-in. So come back on August 4th, and we will see Gulf of America bourbon and a history of the Coast Guard. Well, that does it for Stab the Dragon and for American Catechism and the birthday of Colorado and Stranahan's Blue Peak. Out here.